Silence is not the absence of something, but the presence of everything. Gordon Hempton. That statement echoes like a simple yet powerful reminder in an age where sound dominates everything: notifications, debates, advertisements, and even the noise inside our own minds. Today, people seem afraid of silence. They talk constantly, share endlessly, and crave to be heard. But in the midst of that chaos, silence becomes a rare kind of strength, a sacred space few have the courage to enter. In Stoic philosophy, silence is not just a refuge, it's the foundation of wisdom, focus, and self-mastery. In silence, we observe more clearly. In silence, we choose our words, our actions, and our reactions with intention. This video will guide you through 12 compelling benefits of cultivating silence in your daily life so you can recharge, think with clarity, and face life with greater strength. If you're watching this video, you're not like most people, and that's a good sign. Stay until the end, because what you're about to discover could change the way you live and think. 1. Silence is a sophisticated weapon of power. In the world of power, from politics to business, silence is not an empty void. It's a finely sharpened weapon. People often mistake silence for insecurity, but in truth, silence allows one to control the situation without making a single move. The more someone talks, the easier they are to read. The more someone remains silent, the harder they are to predict, and therefore more dangerous. In strategic situations, silence creates a psychological vacuum, a gray zone that forces the other side to fill in the blanks. They begin to speak more, speculate, reveal plans, and even overreact. That vacuum, as the Stoics understood, is not avoidance. It's a deliberate act, a soft attack that hits hard. Napoleon Bonaparte is a striking example of mastering silence as a strategic weapon. Before the Battle of Austerlitz in 1805, he kept his marching plans completely secret, even spreading false information to mislead the enemy. The result: the Austro-Russian coalition charged into a trap without realizing it. That legendary victory wasn't just due to military tactics, it was born from the deliberate control of information through silence. The Stoics have long understood the danger of excessive speech. Epictetus once said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." This wasn't just a call for politeness. It was a strategy for life. Listen more to understand deeply, and speak less to stay hidden. In the battleground of information, from boardrooms to negotiation tables, it's a principle of survival. Silence isn't just a way to protect a strategic advantage. It's also a method to regain control over emotion. When we stay silent, we don't react impulsively. We observe, analyze, and strike at the most effective moment. The Stoics didn't seek to dominate others, but they always aimed to master themselves, and silence is the first step in that mastery. In an age of endless noise, where everyone talks, posts, and shares non-stop, those who know how to stay silent stand out as rare and formidable. They don't get pulled into the game of distraction. They hold their ground like a soldier in the storm without uttering a word. They command the world's respect. 2. The principle of eyes speak louder than hands. Humans, by instinct, tend to judge others based on what they see and hear. They don't analyze, they interpret. They don't truly understand, they guess. And that's precisely why silence creates a strategic blind spot. No one really knows what you think, what you want, or what you'll do. When you don't speak, don't react, don't reveal your emotions, you're not just withholding information, you're creating a vacuum that others rush to fill with fear, assumptions, or hope. It throws them off balance. They can't strike back because there's nothing to strike. They can't control the game because they don't even know where you are on the board. Angela Merkel, one of the most influential figures in modern Europe, is a vivid example. She often remained silent during waves of political crisis, refraining from giving hasty opinions. But when negotiations reached a critical stage, her voice became the pivot that turned the tide of the entire alliance. Not because she spoke often, but because she chose the right moment to break her silence, and when she did, all eyes turned to her. The eyes always watch, but it's silence that makes people look up. The Stoics understood this. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. Let others reveal their rashness, impulsiveness, and anger. You, the silent one, keep your depth, your composure, your upper hand." That quote speaks not just to virtue, but to strategy, the strategy of someone who doesn't need to speak to win. Silence, when paired with observation, makes you unpredictable, and unpredictability always breeds caution. The hands may act, but it's the eyes, silent and sharp, that truly unsettle others. In the next step, you'll see more clearly why silence is not weakness. On the contrary, it is the coldest, most calculated form of power a person can possess. Don't miss it. The sooner you grasp this, the less you'll be dragged by reaction, and the more you'll begin to control the game itself. 3. Silence is not weakness, but calculating power. At the annual shareholders' meeting of Berkshire Hathaway, as thousands of investors waited in anticipation, there were no long-winded speeches from Warren Buffett. Instead, he sat quietly, listening, observing, occasionally jotting down notes. And then, when he finally spoke, often in short, simple, but profound responses, the entire room seemed to hold its breath. Because everyone knew, every word had been carefully considered. And that's exactly what made them more powerful than any eloquent speech ever could. In today's noisy, fast-paced world, silence is often mistaken for timidity or lack of confidence. But that's a dangerous misunderstanding. In reality, silence, when chosen consciously, is a form of deliberate strength. The Stoics called it inner power, a place where one is not swayed by impulsive emotion or the need to perform. When someone chooses to be silent, they are not being passive, they are analyzing. They are reading the situation. They are listening to what others miss, tone, subtext, motive. And because of that, when they finally speak, their words land like arrows hitting the mark. No need for noise, no need for volume. The power lies in precision and timing. Remember, self-control is the foundation of wisdom. And speech, if not controlled, is a double-edged sword. Silence, in contrast, is both a defense and a weapon. Those who know when to stay silent avoid countless mistakes, premature words, emotional outbursts, or walking straight into the verbal traps set by others. This applies not only in conversation, but also in negotiation, leadership, and personal life. Those who talk too much often reveal their strategy. Those who stay silent at the right moment leave others guessing, and in that uncertainty, you gain the upper hand. You become unpredictable, and unpredictability is a kind of power. So if you've ever been underestimated because you don't talk much, remember this: silence is not weakness. It is a strength, calculated with precision. And sometimes a single sentence spoken at the right moment, after a long pause, can shift the entire game. So learn to master silence like an art form, not because you have nothing to say, but because you are waiting for the right moment to say what matters most. 4. Limit your words to avoid becoming your own trap. Restraining your speech isn't a sign of weakness. It's the strategy of someone who understands a vital truth. Every word you speak is like a stone thrown into the air. You have no control over where it will land. In modern life, where the speed of sharing outpaces the speed of thinking, talking too much is a trap we set for ourselves. Every time we speak, we reveal more than we realize. Not just information, but emotions, vulnerabilities, weak spots. One careless sentence can come back to stab you in the back with the sharpest of blades: the loss of credibility. In politics, a slip of the tongue can spark a national scandal. In business, a moment of overconfidence can become evidence used against you. Think of Elizabeth Holmes, CEO of Theranos. On the witness stand, the very words once spoken with such promise became the rope that tied her down. She made bold claims about unfinished technology, repeated her faith in something unproven, and in the end, those very statements became the weapons used by the media, investors, and regulators to peel away every layer of illusion until the truth stood bare. She wasn't brought down by others. She was undone by her own voice. The Stoics understood words must be measured like gold. Not everything we think needs to be said. Sometimes the wisest move is silence, to listen, to observe, to avoid weakening our own position. Silence doesn't make you invisible. On the contrary, it gives you the space to show up selectively, sharply, and with real power. And if you believe in God, remember this: even He did not speak without pause. In the Bible, there are long moments of silence, sacred gaps where humans are meant to learn trust, slow down, and reflect. Not everything needs an explanation. Some things can only be understood through the stillness of the soul. When you speak too much, others know who you are. When you stay silent, they have to guess. And in their guessing, you keep your power. Have you ever asked yourself, am I talking too much? Leave a comment below on what makes you choose silence over speaking up. And if you find yourself learning to speak less, that's not shyness. It's a sign that you're starting to master yourself. 5. Silence creates information asymmetry. Have you ever wondered why the most powerful people are often the ones who speak the least? They don't need to show off. They don't need to explain themselves. And it's that very silence, the absence of words, that makes them mysterious, unpredictable, and therefore formidable. In Stoic philosophy, this isn't a coincidence. It's a strategy. It's the awareness of someone who understands when you don't speak, others are forced to guess. And in the game of information, the one who's guessing is always at a disadvantage. Silence creates a form of power known as information asymmetry, when one side knows more but deliberately chooses not to reveal it. In negotiations, in conflict, in any kind of strategic exchange, this is incredibly important. The silent party holds the upper hand because they don't show their cards. They give off no signals for the opponent to read. Meanwhile, the other side, lacking information, is forced to make decisions based on assumptions, emotions, or fear. This imbalance is fertile ground for strategy. A vivid example is Keanu Reeves, the actor known for his quiet, reserved demeanor in the loud world of Hollywood. In an industry where celebrities are quick to share every detail of their personal lives on social media or in interviews, Keanu chooses silence. No boasting, no clarifications, no reactions to rumors. When asked personal questions, he often responds with near meditative simplicity, if not avoiding the topic entirely. Because of this, the public and the media are left to guess. What is he thinking? What is his life like? What's his next move? While his peers often tarnish their image with careless words, Keanu maintains a powerful, profound, almost otherworldly persona, built on one single strategy: silence. Silence is not a sign of passivity, it is a strategic choice. The Stoics understood that the more you speak, the more you reveal your weaknesses. You hand your opponent data they can use to analyze you. Meanwhile, silence lets you observe, gather insight, and control the situation. You become an enigma. And an enigma in any battle is more terrifying than any declaration. When you stay silent, you don't just preserve your inner calm, you take command of the information game. And in a world where everyone is desperate to be heard, the one who knows how to stay silent is the one who makes everyone else listen in ways they never expected. 6. The first mover disadvantage. In negotiations, conversations, and even in everyday relationships, the person who speaks first often believes they're taking the lead, but in reality, they're revealing their hand. When you speak first, you're forced to express your stance, reveal emotions, or declare a position. This locks you into your own words. You can't change your mind without paying a price, usually trust, reputation, or influence. But the one who stays silent, they remain unbound. They gain time to observe, analyze, and respond with calculation. They can adapt their strategy based on what they hear. In this light, silence becomes a hidden form of power, like a chessboard with pieces still in disguise. Better to trip with the foot than the tongue. Zeno of Citium, founder of Stoicism, said that, "A stumble may hurt, but a slip of the tongue can break opportunities, honor, and relationships." That quote reminds us, in many situations, speaking too soon isn't just unwise, it's self-sabotage. Take job interviews, for example. Candidates who rush to answer tough questions often expose their weaknesses or reveal a lack of thoughtfulness. On the other hand, those who pause, think, and then respond, even slowly, tend to radiate confidence, composure, and depth. In political negotiations or business deals, this principle is even clearer. The first speaker often gets maneuvered into a corner or unintentionally exposes sensitive points. In these moments, silence is no longer passive. It's a tactic. It's power. We're already halfway through this journey. If you're still here, I want to say thank you. That tells me you're not just listening, you're reflecting. And that's a rare thing in today's world. But don't leave just yet. The next part will take us even deeper. Silence isn't just a shield. It's a tool to probe and assert power. This is where silence begins to speak for you, creating an impact that words can't match. Stick around till the end and try dropping this in the comments. I choose silence, not because I'm weak, but because I'm listening. Together, we'll discover why the one who stays silent is often the one truly in control. 7. Silence is a tool for probing and building authority. In FBI interrogation rooms, a particular tactic is often used: silence. After asking a question, the investigator doesn't rush to speak again, doesn't push, doesn't try to fill the space with unnecessary words. They simply wait. And in that waiting, the person being questioned often begins to speak, not because they want to, but because they can't stand the silence. Things that should have remained unsaid slip out. Defenses wear down. And the truth, or at least a crack in the story, emerges. This isn't just a psychological trick. It's a powerful expression of quiet strength, something Stoic philosophy has long encouraged. When you stay silent, you're not ruled by emotion or the urge to prove yourself. Instead, you gain the upper hand subtly. You force others to act while you remain still and watch. Silence gives you the right to listen, not the kind of listening that's waiting to counter, but the kind that seeks to understand the person in front of you. In interviews, negotiations, and even casual conversations, that pause invites others to reveal what they originally meant to keep hidden. It also sets you apart, calm, thoughtful, unrushed. And from that, credibility is born. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The more we value things outside our control, the less control we have." At first glance, this may not seem to speak directly about silence, but it hits the core. The person who tries to dominate every conversation, to jump in, to explain, they're driven by emotion. They're chasing the need to control the outside, what others think, how they're perceived. In contrast, the one who chooses silence understands that true power isn't about controlling others, it's about mastering oneself. And in that quiet presence, respect begins to form, not because you speak well, but because you don't need to speak to be heard. Silence, when used at the right moment, is a sharp, probing tool. It forces the world to reveal itself before you make a move. At the same time, it lays the foundation for a persona that is composed, alert, and trustworthy, qualities that build real authority. In a world full of noise and argument, the one who can stay silent holds the balance of power. 8. In negotiations, silence forces the other party to reveal their cards. In a negotiation, the person who speaks less often holds more power. Because silence, though it may appear to be a sign of deference, is in fact a sophisticated strategy. The Stoics understood that action isn't always the way to take control. Sometimes patient silence is the key to mastering the situation. Negotiation isn't a game of words, it's a battle of wits, where the side with more information holds the upper hand. Imagine a simple situation. You want to buy a used car. You make your opening offer. The seller doesn't respond right away. They just look at you silently. In those few brief seconds, the tension begins to rise. You start to wonder if your offer was too low. You begin to justify yourself and then blurt out a higher number just to break the silence. But at that moment, you've shown your hand. You've just revealed your limit, and you've lost the advantage you once held. This happens at every level, from negotiating employment contracts to closing deals with business partners. When a candidate states their expected salary, the employer might simply nod slightly and stay silent. In that moment, the candidate starts second-guessing. Was I asking too much? Are they considering rejecting me? Out of anxiety, they may revise their proposal or offer concessions just to fill the void. And once again, silence wins. The Stoics didn't use silence to manipulate. They used it to observe, to understand, and to choose the right moment. As Epictetus once said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." We are born to observe more, speak less because words can betray us, but silence never will. When you choose to stay silent, you're not just refusing to be controlled, you're prompting the other side to reveal their strategy. If you ever walk into a high-stakes negotiation, remember, don't fear the silence. Let others be the ones to break it, because in silence, you lose nothing, but they might lose everything. Have you ever experienced a moment where silence was your secret weapon? Share your story in the comments so we can learn together and grow through stillness. 9. Silence conveys more authority than words. Amid the clatter of keyboards, the ping of phone notifications, and endless arguments, silence suddenly becomes a rare form of power. The Stoics understood this well. They knew that the one who talks the most isn't necessarily in control of the conversation. In fact, the one who speaks little but at the right moment holds the greatest influence. Silence, when used intentionally, radiates presence. It's not just restraint in speech, it's a quiet declaration of depth and confidence. When someone walks into a room and says nothing at first, but their gaze and calm demeanor command attention, that's power. Steve Jobs knew this. During product launches, he didn't just talk about technology, he created an experience. He paused. He let the silence hang. He made people wait and then dropped a single sharp sentence that sent the whole room into eruption. His silence said more than any paragraph ever could. One famous quote from Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher, reads, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." This isn't just a call to listen more, it's a call to restraint. Words can be twisted, misquoted, and taken out of context. Silence, on the other hand, remains intact. It cannot be distorted, and that's why it's more trustworthy. Beyond that, in the realm of the spiritual, silence is also the highest form of communication with God. When prayer is more than words, when it becomes a quiet presence, humans enter a sacred connection where language is no longer necessary. Faith doesn't need to be shouted. It shows itself most clearly in the way someone lives quietly but stands firm in their values. The silence of faith is a wordless declaration. I don't need to argue because I know where I stand. This is why the Stoics didn't see silence as a retreat. They saw it as a strategy, as leverage, as a quiet statement. I control myself, and no one gets to force my reaction just because they want one. In that silence, there is dignity, there is self-mastery, and there is a kind of authority that words can never reach. Silence is not a void. It is an exclamation mark that doesn't need to shout. 10. The discipline and patience of strategic silence. In communication, the human instinct is to speak as quickly as possible, to argue back, to justify immediately, to wrap things up fast. But the faster we react, the more vulnerable we become. And once we speak too soon, too much, we hand over control to the other side, sometimes even before the game begins. The Stoics are not afraid of silence. They train themselves to endure the wait, to sit still before responding, because they know the quiet is where wise decisions are born. Verbal discipline is not weakness, it is intentional composure. It demands inner strength, the kind that resists the urge to react emotionally or to always have the last word. Think of Abraham Lincoln, one of the most revered presidents in American history, who was known for saying, "Better to remain silent and be thought a fool than to speak and to remove all doubt." Lincoln didn't just speak less, he knew when to speak and when to stop. His silence was a calculated choice, not a coincidence. Don't let the feeling of needing to respond right now fool you. See every moment of silence as a moment where you withhold clues, where you refuse to fall into emotional traps. So the next time you feel the urge to speak just to fill the gap, stop. That is the test of discipline. Imagine you're being heavily criticized in a meeting. All eyes are on you. Someone has just said something unfair, and you feel the need to push back instantly. But then you say nothing. No explanation, no reaction, just silence. The entire room seems confused. No one knows what you're thinking. And in that ambiguity, you start to gain the upper hand. So how can silence be both an attack and a defense at once? Stay tuned for the next part and discover the dual power of silence, a sharp mental weapon the Stoics swore by. 11. Silence is both an attack and a defense. Is someone who stays silent truly at a disadvantage, or could that be the person holding the upper hand? In Stoic philosophy and in modern strategic thinking, silence is far from a retreat. It's both a solid shield and a sharp spear. When we choose silence, we're defending ourselves in one of the smartest ways possible, by not revealing our position, by not opening the door for judgment or exploitation. In any argument, the instinctive reaction is to fight back, to explain, or to prove ourselves right. But a Stoic practitioner knows, every word we speak is a door we open, and not every door should be opened. Silence allows us to control the situation, lower the emotional temperature, and maintain calm as well as full control. But don't mistake silence for surrender. In many situations, silence is the most effective form of attack. When we don't respond, the other side starts guessing. They can't read our intentions, and that uncertainty builds quiet pressure. In business, negotiations, or even personal relationships, strategic ambiguity can lead the other party into missteps, because people fear most what they don't understand. A classic example, Apple. Throughout the development of the iPhone, Apple maintained near total silence. Not a single tweet, not a single leak confirmed. Rivals like Samsung and Google knew something was brewing, but not what. And that ambiguity kept them from reacting in time. When Steve Jobs took the stage, every word he said was deliberate, refined, and each announcement hit like a preemptive strike. Silence didn't just protect the secret, it created surprise and seized the market with perfect timing. The Stoic understands that power doesn't come from saying more or speaking faster, but from saying the right thing at the right time, after deep thought. Silence is a strategic weapon, both protective and piercing. And once you learn to use it well, you're no longer playing by someone else's rules. You're creating your own game. 12. The psychological effects of silence. The psychological effects of silence. This isn't just an effect. It's a subtle, strategic, and incredibly powerful tool. In any conversation, the first person to break the silence is often the one who loses control. This doesn't stem from weakness, but from insecurity, because silence forces us to face ourselves. And in that stillness, the human mind starts to operate in a very predictable way. When confronted with someone who says nothing, most of us begin to turn inward. We ask ourselves, did I say something wrong? Are they judging me? Should I say something more to fill the gap? That uncertainty makes us restless, and in that unsettled state, we're prone to say things we haven't fully thought through, sometimes revealing vulnerabilities, sometimes expressing emotions or opinions we never intended to expose. The Stoics understood this mechanism deeply. Silence is a form of psychological influence that requires no action. It compels the other person to react, to interpret, even to define you through the lens of their own imagination. And strangely enough, in most cases, they don't assume you're clueless or shallow. They assume you're wise, composed, thoughtful, all because you chose the right moment to stay silent. What they fail to realize is, silence doesn't reflect who you are. It reflects what's going on in their own minds. Take a specific example, a job interview. When the interviewer asks, "Is there anything else you'd like to add?" and then falls silent, many candidates can't bear that pressure. They keep talking, often far more than necessary, and in doing so, they end up revealing weaknesses, a lack of direction, or unnecessary details that diminish their value. Meanwhile, a candidate who understands the power of a pause will simply smile and say, "I believe what I've shared captures who I am and what I can offer." And then they go silent. In this sense, silence isn't a shield. It's a mental lever. You don't need to say a lot to leave an impression sometimes. The absence of words creates the most powerful impact. That empty space, others fill it with their own expectations, anxieties, or admiration. Silence doesn't make you invisible. On the contrary, it makes it impossible to ignore. Silence is not absence. It is a strategy, a power, an art. We've explored together 12 compelling benefits of silence, from sharpening focus and reducing stress, to mastering psychological control and gaining the upper hand in any situation. In today's world, you've seen it firsthand. Those who talk too much reveal their hand. Those who stay silent control the pace of the game. In a world where everyone wants to be heard, the one who knows when not to speak is the one who truly gets listened to. Now ask yourself, when was the last time you were intentionally silent? Were you observing or just unsure of what to say? Drop your answer in the comments. I want to hear your thoughts. If you found this video helpful, make sure to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The next video is already on your screen. Keep watching. The next power is waiting for you.